Okay, so we're going to start chapter 7, and this is going to be based upon the research that you're going to do in this course. So, again, chapter 7, survey research. All right, so let's jump down here. Why might we conduct survey research? This is going to allow us to collect data directly from participants by asking them questions. And surveys are a common and important method of studying behavior. I'm sure that you've completed plenty of surveys. You're going to create your own here in this class, and it provides useful information for making public policy decisions. And it's important as a complement to experimental research findings or conducting the survey research, obtaining great conclusions, which might result in experiments in and of itself. So the accuracy and truthfulness are potential issues with surveys. So a response set. This is going to be a tendency to respond to survey questions from a particular perspective rather than give answers directly related to the questions. And so that's going to be an issue of response bias, basically, and participants are not going to accurately answer the questions. Then you have the social desirability bias, and this is when participants will answer questions based upon what you think they should answer or how they think society would want them to answer. This is why it's sometimes hard to get accurate responses to surveys like, let's say, on sexual behaviors, and that people may be less likely to honestly respond based upon their actual behavior because of potential thoughts that, oh, so society would judge me. Maybe this isn't completely confidential. People might find out, or there's some sort of shame involved. So it can be hard to garner accurate responses to every single survey from participants. Now, when it comes to constructing questions to ask in your survey, you need to explicitly determine what is the objective of your research. The questions you develop have to be tied to your research questions and the variables in those research questions. There are 3 general types of survey questions: facts and demographics, which you might collect. You might collect, maybe you're collecting gender or age or education level. That would be, again, basic information. Also, then behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs. Those are going to be the basic types of questions that you're going to develop. Now, when it comes to question wording, there's a number of potential problems that make it difficult to understand questions. You want to develop questions that people can easily understand. They usually say that you should create questions that an 8th grader would be able to understand and answer. You don't want to use unfamiliar technical terms, imprecise terms. You want to make sure you use good grammar, phrasing that overloads working memory. So again, don't make it too lengthy or heavy, and also don't mislead. You want answers to be, or questions to be, as straightforward and easy to understand and answer as possible. The questions should be simple. Again, avoid technical terms. If you're asking something complex, provide like an example or a description of what you're actually asking. Don't use double-barreled questions like, should senior citizens give more money for recreation centers and food assistance programs? Those are 2 questions. Those are 2 questions. You would want to break those up. And then avoid loaded questions. Do you favor eliminating the wasteful excesses in the budget? What does that mean? What area of the budget are we talking about? You would want to specifically look at what area of the budget. This is a very overloaded question in that this could mean a lot of things and the budget as a whole. So that's a big question. You don't want to phrase questions with negatives. So do you feel that the city should not approve the proposed women's shelter? Again, not. Okay, what you would say, I mean, honestly, what you would say is, do you feel the city should approve the proposed women's shelter? And people can agree or disagree. Stay away from negatives. And when you ask several questions, a respondent may employ a response set to agree or disagree with all of them. Again, this is when somebody marks C all the way down a test, or agrees with everything, or disagrees with everything. And those are yay saying and nay saying. And one way to detect this is to word questions so that consistent agreement is unlikely. So you might actually have some reverse scored questions. I would not recommend that in this class, but you could do that to catch those participants that do actually do that. The questions can be either closed or open-ended. So with closed-ended questions, there can only be a limited number of responses. It's easier to assign values to responses. There's a fixed number of response alternatives, and they're more likely when the dimensions of the variables are well defined. So again, it's going to encompass those variables you're studying much better. Whereas with open-ended questions, respondents are free to answer any way they like. So this can kind of give valuable insights into what people are thinking, but there's more time required to categorize and code the responses. So with open-ended questions, this is going to add additional effort required for you as a researcher because you're going to have to look at, okay, they said this in this question, but then they added all of this additional information. You're going to have to go through that, analyze it, and code it. Whereas in this class, you're going to have closed-ended questions. An individual is only going to be able to give one answer to the question. You are going to use a rating scale in this class, hopefully a Likert scale. This will rating scales, and again, there are a lot of resources in Canvas related to Likert scales to develop them. But this is when we assign scores along a numerical dimension, and they're very common in many areas of research. So again, this would be like strongly disagree to strongly agree. And again, maybe it is a 5-point Likert scale. So in regard to that, like strongly disagree would be a 1, strongly or disagree would be a 2, neutral would be a 3, agree would be a 4, strongly agree would be a 5. And that would allow you to statistically analyze the information that participants provide. So you might have a graphic rating scale. This requires a mark along a continuous line in which people just, again, literally basically mark a line as to how whether they agree or disagree or whatever it might be. There's semantic differential scale. It's a measure of the meaning of concepts rather than on rating them on a series of bipolar adjectives. Pictorial scales. This might be appropriate for populations like children who might have trouble understanding other scales. But again, we are going to use a Likert scale in here. And sometimes researchers do need to provide labels to more clearly define the meaning of each alternative. So one common type of scale assumes a middle alternative is a neutral point halfway between the endpoints, kind of like we were talking about, or undecided. They literally do not know or don't have an opinion. Or comparative rating, like lower 50, upper 25, upper 10, upper 5. A frequency of behavior, less than twice a week, about twice a week, about 4 times a week, so on and so forth. And in your Likert scale, you can have a neutral point or you don't need one. There are pros and cons to having that in a variety of studies. So you've got your questions, you have your rating scale. Then when it comes to finalizing the instrument, when it comes to formatting, it needs to have a professional appearance, make sure it's free from errors, use the scale format all the way through, other than potentially the demographics you're asking for. Otherwise, you're going to use that rating scale. Put the most interesting questions first, or the ones you really want people to answer, because as time goes on, people may get fatigued, have survey fatigue. Group related questions together and refine questions. So give the questions to a small group and have them think aloud while answering, like, okay, do I need to reword this so people can better understand that? You do not need to do this in this course, but that would be the formal way to do this. All right, so administering surveys, questionnaires. Surveys, questionnaires, going to kind of use this synonymously. These are going to be in written format, and respondents write their answers. Because again, surveys can be given through questionnaires in this way, in that they write their answers. It can be online, they respond to answers, click a button. Surveys can also be given in an interview style, like a semi-structured survey. We are not going to do this in this class, but you're going to develop a questionnaire or survey, give it as a questionnaire, and they're going to cost less than interviews. They allow the respondent to be anonymous as long as you don't ask for any identifying information, potentially resulting in more accurate data. The issue is that they have to be able to understand the questions you're asking. There's also the issue of motivation, in that you do not want a very long survey or a very loaded survey because people do get bored. Often researchers are able to distribute questionnaires to groups of individuals, and it provides a captive audience who are likely to complete the questionnaire. A mail survey that can be mailed to a home or business address. That's not as likely anymore. Online surveys are going to be much more likely. Now, when you do yours, you can do it pencil and paper, hand it out to people, or you're welcome to do it online, send people a link. And you might want to use SurveyMonkey to do that. And it is obviously important to consider ethical issues like we've talked about in the past. Now, the benefits of interviews. Okay, so now we're moving from questionnaires, we're talking about interviews. You're going to have higher response rates because, for example, if you get like a questionnaire or survey/questionnaire in your email, are you very likely to even respond? Probably not. But if somebody is wanting to do an interview with you, you're probably setting up a time and you're probably going to appear. And so response rates are going to be higher. The interviewer can clarify any problems a person might have in understanding questions. So if somebody doesn't understand it, they can answer those questions. Unlike if it's an online questionnaire, you're not going to be able to be present to answer any questions. And the interviewer can ask follow-up questions as well, especially if it's a semi-structured interview. Some of the issues: interviewer bias. The interviewer can inadvertently show approval or disapproval of certain answers, even by their nonverbal facial expressions or the tone of their voice, and that can influence the following answers that a participant gives. Interviewers might also have expectations that could lead them to see what they're looking for in the respondent's answers. So they're literally just it's confirmation bias. We're looking for the specific parts of a participant's answer that we are going to cling on to, and that's what we're going to report as their answer. Face-to-face interviews, they meet. Telephone interviews, you do it over the phone. Computer-assisted telephone interviews, computer shows questions and records responses. Interactive voice responses, respondents can respond via telephone keypad or speech recognition. There's also focus groups. And this is when you have a group of 6 to 10 people. They're brought together for about 2 to 3 hours, and it's basically an open-ended conversation about the questions at hand. And in most cases, a researcher is probably going to audio record the entire focus group and code the answers at a later time. When researchers wish to make comparisons over time, they may administer the same questions year after year. So again, they might come back and do the same research. This would be more longitudinal in nature. In a panel study, the same sample of subjects is studied at 2 or more points in time. Now, here we go. So you might want to study, let's say you want to study NPCC students. Okay. You are looking at does increased cell phone use predict higher levels of depression amongst NPCC students? Okay, great. So that's the population. That's the defined group of individuals you are going to draw a sample from. Now, obviously, you cannot collect data from all of those individuals, all of the students. You're going to have to collect from a sample. These are members of a population that you select to participate in a research investigation. So instead of, again, surveying all of the NPC students, you're going to select and survey only a portion of them. That's the difference between the population and the sample. And if you properly sample, you can use the information from those participants, and then you're able to generalize them to the overall North Platte Community College student population. As long as you are getting a fairly representative sample. If you're only collecting data from, let's say, the men's basketball team, that's not going to be representative of all NPCC students. You have students who are not athletes. You have students who are non-traditional. You have students with a lot of different demographics. That's not going to be representative of them. So as long as you're sampling a representative sample of your population, you can generalize to that population. All right, so sampling from a population. All right, so when it comes to a confidence interval, this is going to be an interval of values within which there's a given level of confidence where the population value lies. It's usually a 0.01 or 0.05 confidence interval. You really don't need to worry about this. But then there's sampling error. This is the potential deviation from the true population value of the value obtained using sample data. A larger sample size is going to reduce the size of the confidence interval. And so that's why, again, if you have a population of, again, 2,000 students, maybe you sample I don't know, 125. That's pretty good. If you're just sampling 10, that's going to increase the potential of sampling error, and your confidence interval is going to be much larger. So, the more people that you can sample, the better, even though that's not always feasible. So, different sampling techniques. All right. So, each in probability sampling, each member of the population has a specifiable probability or chance of being chosen. So, everybody, again, in that NPCC student population has the same chance of being chosen. That's not going to happen here. We're going to use a non-probability sample in that you are basically going to choose your participants. But in this, again, everybody has the same chance. Simple random sampling is a type of this, and every member of the population has an equal probability of being selected, in that you basically choose names out of a hat. There's also stratified random sampling. The population is divided into subgroups, and random samples are taken from each strata. So maybe you have, okay, you have like age groups. So you have like age groups 18 to 28, 29 to, 29 to 39, 40 to 40, 40 to 50. Those would be strata. They are groups with specific demographics, or you could do male, female. You collect so many, you have so many participants that are male, so many that are female, or so many that are athletes, so many that are not athletes. You group into specific strata or specific groups. There's also cluster sampling. This is when there are existing groups or geographic areas called clusters that are identified, and samples are taken from those clusters. So this might include like students from the Valentine campus, students from the Imperial campus, students from the North Platte campus, students from the McCook campus. Those would be clusters. There's not necessarily specific demographics or information related to them, but there's they're an existing group in a specific geographic area that you would collect that information from. You are going to sample participants in a non-probability manner. So you will use non-probability sampling. The probability or chance of any particular member of the population being chosen, it's not known. You are going to do a convenience sample. It's haphazard, or take them where you find them sampling. You are going to find people who are just willing to fill out your survey. That is who you are going to sample. So whoever's willing to take it to complete your survey, whoever you're willing to ask to complete your survey, that's your sample. It's a convenience sample. There's also purposive sampling. The sample meets a predetermined criterion, and that maybe you're just studying women. And so as a result of that, you're only going to sample women. That's purposive. Snowball sampling. This is when a sampling procedure in which, again, one or more current research participants, let's say you ask somebody to participate, they get one of their friends, and then they come participate. And then they get one of their friends. So it's literally like a snowball rolling down a hill. One begets another, begets another. There's also quota sampling. This is when the sample reflects the numerical composition of various subgroups in the population. So again, when it comes to quota sampling, what you're looking at is that like maybe there are 100 students who are athletes. Again, this is just hypothetical. 100 students that are athletes, 200 that are not athletes. So you have 300 in your total population. What you're going to do is, let's say you want 10% of each, so you would sample 10 athletes, 20 non-athletes. That would proportionally represent the actual population involved, and you would have quotas. Okay, so here's your sampling. Here's some examples. Here's some more examples. Okay, so when it comes to evaluating samples, they need to be representative. They need to represent the population that you're sampling, that you are studying. To create a completely unbiased sample, you should use a probability sampling technique and randomly sample from a population containing all individuals in the population. That would reduce all bias. We aren't going to do this in this class, but that would reduce all bias. And then contact and obtain completed responses from everybody in the sample. So you cannot have people that are dropping out of the sample. And again, it's rarely achieved. There's always going to be some sort of bias involved. And even with random sampling, there can be biased as well. The sampling frame, so this is the actual population of individuals from which the sample is drawn. That might actually decrease the generalizability of the results to the population. So let's say that you are studying, okay, so you're still studying North Platte Community College students, and you get a sample of North Platte Community College students, but you can only obtain a sample from those who are on South Campus on Fridays. That's going to be your sampling frame, but that's not necessarily going to be generalizable to all North Platte Community College students because not everybody's on South Campus on Fridays. Some are going to be in North, some are going to be online, some are going to be there other days. So your sampling frame may not represent your overall population. And also your response rate. How many of your participants are actually completing the survey? That's going to affect, again, the objectivity of your sampling procedure. Attrition is technically a bias. Okay, so here's reasons we're using the convenience sample. Much of the research in psychology uses this. The advantage is saving time and money. Advantages tend to outweigh the sample concerns for the researcher. So this is the way we do most of our research. We're going to use the people that are available. And research findings can provide important information, even though the data can't be strictly generalized beyond the population defined by the sample. But again, it gives us an idea of specific behaviors amongst humans. So hopefully that gives a little insight into sampling methodology. It lets you know that, yes, we're going to use a convenience sample in this course. And again, if you have questions about any of this, please let me know. I'm here to help. These lectures are really just overviews, so I am here to explain anything in much more depth, and I hope you have a great day.